So now it's time to put the veins in the ornamental cabbage. And in fact, I need to put a fewer number of veins in because I'm actually going to develop this in 5 sections. So this is one simple section that I will subdivide down into 5. Now, I've accidentally not thought about bringing my normal cutter, so I'm going to just use a butter knife, which I find if you keep a butter knife good and sharp, it's actually good enough for these sort of jobs, as long as your material isn't too soft. And this is yesterday's, so I started this yesterday and we're now a day later, so it's not quite so sticky and soft. So I'm going to cut through and see whether I get right through on the other side, and I didn't really. It's kind of twisted and this side's bigger than the other side, so I'm just going to have another go. Put it back together, and I've got to remember that that goes that way, but that's sort of twisted so that this starts here and then goes down. So I'm going to go like that and see whether that adds enough to there. Yeah, I think it does. And one thing you'll notice is there's quite a lot of holes where the air has got between the layers, and this is a good time to get rid of them at this level at least, and you'll get another chance the next time you cut into it. So as you can see, I'm just squashing those holes right out, and hopefully they'll stick together really well and there won't be too much more air in. There's always a little by this method. It's quite difficult to get rid of every little scrap. So this is one of the things I still have to work out the best way of doing to avoid those. We all have our problems to face, and that's one of mine. Right, so we now want to put a couple of veins in, but not as many as I normally would. I'm not going to put the smaller veins in, so I'm just going to put 2 veins in. So I'm going to cut down there once, twice, and I'm going to make the veins in that same cream colour that's in the middle there. Once, twice. So you can use a butter knife as long as you're really firm with it. Okay, let's have a look on the other side and see if those line up anything like. They don't have to be perfect, but yeah, they're fine. That doesn't line up with that one. That's going to be a deeper one, but I don't think I mind that too much. Okay, so now we can separate them, sort of exploded diagram fashion. I like to do it that way because you can always see where you are. You can always see where it goes back together. Otherwise you end up with all sorts of bits all over the place and you get completely lost. Right, so now I'll just put that to one side. I need to cut some of the clay. There are a few little bits of pink on there, but I'm not worried about that. And I need to put each section, I need to get rid of the air, I need to put each section on the veins that I'm going to put in. And actually the easiest way when you've got 3 sections like this is just to cover both sides of this middle piece. So I'm just going to, one of the things I can't do quite so easily with the butter knife is the chamfering. So I'll just do that with an ordinary blade. Just chamfer that off so that it's nice and narrow at the top. And then I'll just put a piece on the other side as well. This is just another way of doing it. But if you've seen my normal way of doing it. Just have a look back if you're confused at my normal cabbages on YouTube, and that will give you an idea about how I normally do it. This is just a rapid way when you're just making 3 sections. I'll just thin this out a little bit. So it's coming to the edge, but it's not overlapping the edge too much, so it's becoming thinner at the edge. Again, I've got some air to get rid of, so I need to just give that a little squeeze. Just make sure I've got rid of the air underneath there as well. There you go. I wasn't watching for that. That's a bit too hard stuck down, so I can't check that one. Check this one, just a little bit of air in there. Put it back together. So that's 1/2. I've already got a nice chamfered edge there, so I can start with that on that side. Get rid of the air. Put that on that side. You can see some air there. Once again, squeeze it together. I'm going to ask about a bit, I think, and see how people avoid that air between the sections, because it is quite difficult to avoid, especially if your material's quite sticky and it sticks down before the air escapes. I'll chamfer this edge. So the chamfer goes towards the outside edge. So this is quite an advanced cane, really. For those people who are just starting, it's a bit advanced. It's not very advanced if you're really into caning. Right. So that's got to go in the middle there, between those 2 pieces. Just get rid of that air. So I don't like that very much because it overlaps. So I'm just going to get rid of that. So otherwise it's going to be obvious. It's going to have a big bump in it. Right, so those are the 2 halves. And now I want that middle section, which is a bit, it's on an angle. It's like an elongated triangle. So this should be about long enough. It is. I'll just put that to one side there. And to make an elongated triangle, I just chamfer the edge off there. And in fact, I can do this one as well, like that. Oh, I haven't made that deep enough. Oh dear. I'll start again with that because I haven't made it deep enough. So right now, I'll do another one. Yeah, that's going to be deep enough. So I'll chamfer that edge off. Needs to fit as well that way, so I'll put that like that. The next piece can be smaller because what we're going to do is build up a narrow triangle. So the next one can go over the first one, but a little bit further down. And depending on how wide you want this middle section to be, you can add 3 or 4 layers. I think I might need to make it a little bit thicker at the bottom, so I'm going to do 4 layers. And that should do. So let's get rid of all these excess bits. Get them out of the way. As I say, I'm not going to do any extra veins because this is going to be lengthened and then subdivided again. So So I'll just put that in the middle. I've made that a bit too big, but in fact when you lengthen it sometimes that middle bit disappears, so it's not a bad thing to have it a bit extra long. So I think I'll leave it like that. Okay, so we now need to lengthen this cane. So to lengthen a cane, I've made this one quite soft so that it'll lengthen fairly quickly for me. So it's all the materials have got a bit of softener in them because I want it to move fairly quickly. If you get a cane that's quite big like this and it doesn't move as quickly as you want, it's quite a good idea to get a rolling pin or a glass bottle with straight sides. Excuse me. And give it a sharp wrap around the outside, and that just helps it to lengthen. Once again, this is just for people who are starting off and don't really know this. The one thing that you're trying to avoid when you're making a cane like this is that the centre starts to go inwards, and that can happen if your material is softer on the outside than it is on the inside. For example, if you've left it for a day or two, I did leave it yesterday but I knew it was soft. If you've left it for a while and the inside is cooler and isn't moving as quickly. So I'm squeezing the middle and trying to make sure that the outsides bow out rather than drop in. So I'm sort of holding these edges back and squeezing up against the edge, and that just makes that more likely to happen. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that I want to use as much of this cane as possible, and if it drops in you'll waste a lot more. And the other thing is that if it drops in, as you roll it later, you have a fault line which can rub against itself and just separate the whole cane or a rather large part of it. So that's two reasons for not wanting to get a fold in the middle. So now it's in a sort of dumbbell shape or a capstan. I call it a capstan shape. You can then start to work it out from there. A lot of people say, oh, well, now it's time to roll it. It's not time to roll it. Most of the work should be done with your fingers. And the reason for that is because if there's any air inside there, it will shatter your whole cane. Not shatter in a splintering way, but it will just fall apart and rub against itself and make big holes. So the best thing to do is to use your hands initially, and especially until you first open your cane up. When you cut it in half, that's when you'll see how much air there is. I used to make a lot of orange, lemon and lime canes, and I got so used to handling them that just by rolling I could feel if there was any air in them, because there was a sort of almost imperceptible click as you rolled it. I'm trying to feel for that now. I think there is actually a little bit in there. But yes, it became quite a skill that I had. I think I've pretty much lost it now, but we'll see. Anyway. So as you can see, I'm sort of working outwards on this cane and making sure that I keep as much of this bowed. And that sometimes means allowing this edge to come back a bit, just to make sure I get as much of that cane usable as possible. This is a fairly big cane. Most of you wouldn't work this big unless you're working a in production to sell. But for me, I actually prefer working with bigger canes. I'm more used to it. But this has several, I would say it's about 1, 2, about 3 to 4 blocks of colour in it. So it's quite an expensive cane to play with if you're not sure it's going to work. But since I've done this cane before, I'm pretty sure it's going to work. So I want to get this long enough to cut into 5 pieces. I'm going against my own principles of not rolling till the very end here, just for speed. But as you can see, I'm doing some tugging as well on that. Right, let's cut some of this end off because we know it's not going to work perfectly. We want to have a reasonably perfect shape. So there is some waste on that. You could use a bit more of that, but I want to make sure it's all pretty good. Right, so I need 5 pieces of this, and I don't need them to be equal sized. So I'm going to cut a reasonably big piece out of the middle because I want the middle to be bigger. So that's the middle. I can push that down a little bit, make it back into a slightly bigger cane. And then these 2 pieces need cutting again, but I'm cutting them I'm cutting slightly off centre, so that this piece will be the next piece, and then the smaller piece will be the edge piece. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So we've got the biggest piece, and now we want to line up this second piece there at the side of it. And then the third piece is the same length as that second piece, and that wants to go. In fact, I'm going to take these apart again, if I can, and squeeze them until we get a bit of a point on that light coloured bit. And I can see that the pink is softer because it's moving quicker than the light colour. So I'm going to do a little cut off on there as well. And the same with the small ones. They all want to be the same length, so the small ones will be lengthened at the same time as squeezed. Right, and because I want these light bits to meet up, I'm going to have to cut the edges of all of them. I hope you'll see what I mean as I put it together. It needs to have a clean and tidy edge. So that's one. Another small one. Two. 3. Four, and the last one here. Now the other thing I remember is I want to put an extra section down the middle of stalk. So I'm just going to cut a piece with a chamfered edge so that I can fit it in. And I want to fit it into the number 1 cane, so this is the biggest one. I'm just cutting a little indentation into it. Opening it out a little bit. And slotting that in. So that forms our main stem. And then we need to stick number 2 and number 3 so that they also end up touching that light colour. Have I got this right? Yes, I believe so. I think that's number 2 and 3. And that it really needs to touch. And then these last 2 also need to touch that stem. So this is where it gets a little bit difficult. Right, so that's there. You can see a shape coming. Of course, the cane will be, if I don't squash it, will be like a 5-pointed edge. But that's not what we want, because we need to really to make it more of a circular cane. So I need to put some extra green in to separate these pieces and to fill the holes. This clay has got a little bit hardened overnight, so it's just a little bit more difficult to use. But anyway, I'm cutting this into a sort of triangle shape, just another small triangle. And this is just to fill the gaps. Because if I squashed it together, just squashed it into a cylinder, I would have some strange shapes. These would all square off a bit, and it's not really what I want. Now we've got those in, I can take this extra piece back off, because otherwise it'll just fold and make a rather thick piece here. So just press that in. Right. So now all I need to do is to lengthen this cane. So just the same as before, start in the middle Give it a good squeeze because there'll still be little bits of air between these sections, especially as it's very sticky, so it'll have stuck together, leaving some air in between. That's quite nice.